And Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. You know, the big difference between the law, the way the law commanded and the way Christ commanded is this. The law gave commandments and Jesus gave commandments, but there's a big difference in the way it was given. In the law it was thou shalt and thou shalt not. It's like a master telling his slave, go and do this, don't do that. Whereas Jesus, you never see him saying thou shalt not. That's the language of the law. And when preachers speak like that, they are old covenant preachers. Jesus always gave freedom. He said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Otherwise, don't keep them. I'm not interested. I'm not interested, the Lord is saying, in a person keeping my commandments if he doesn't love me. It's back under the law. It's going to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You know, doing the right thing, but not out of love for Christ. In other words, the motive with which we do something is much more important to God than what we actually do. We can find a satisfaction in what we have done. The Lord does not find satisfaction in that if it doesn't arise from a right motive. And the motive must be that I love Christ more than anything else on earth or anyone else on earth, where I can lose everything, and if I don't lose Jesus Christ, I'm happy. So each one of us, is good for us to evaluate ourselves like this. Not whether we are doing certain things and congratulating ourselves that we've kept New Testament commandments or are accepted in the church as good brothers and sisters. It counts for nothing. In the day the Lord comes, the Bible says He's going to bring to light the things that are hidden. And what's the primary thing He's going to bring to light is the motives of men's hearts. That's what we read in 1 Corinthians in chapter 4. That don't judge anything, it says, until the Lord comes, verse 5. Don't judge anyone or anything till the Lord comes, 1 Corinthians 4:5. Because when the Lord comes, He will bring to light the things hidden in the darkness, and that is, He'll disclose the motives of men's hearts, and then each man's praise will come to him from God. Do you know that verse? It's what the Bible says, this is how God's going to judge in the final day. In other words, when I stand before Him, the Lord's not just going to see what I did and what I said. Of course, He's going to evaluate that, but behind that, what is the motive? Did it come from a fervent love for Jesus Christ? Is it because I love the Lord that I came to the meetings? Is it because I love the Lord that I read His Word? Is it because I love the Lord that I did anything for Him? Is it because I love the Lord that I wanted to stay away from the love of money? Is it because I love the Lord that I stayed away from lusting after women or losing my temper? Or is it because I love the Lord that I took up the cross? Otherwise, it's worthless. So when you think of our access to the tree of life today, which we've seen, tree of life is this fervent devotion to Christ. Before Adam sinned, he could access the tree of life easily. He could just walk up to it. But we know in Genesis chapter 3, after he sinned, God put a flaming sword, Genesis 3:24, that went in every direction around the tree of life, teaching us that now you can't come to the tree of life without that sword falling on us before we reach the tree of life. So ever since Adam sinned, there's a thing which we have called our self-life. And what I learned from that picture is it is impossible to have a fervent devotion to Christ without the sword of God falling and slaying, killing my self-life. Here is where we can deceive ourselves. I can deceive myself saying, yeah, I love Jesus. I really believe I love Jesus with all my heart. And if your self-life is not slain and killed, you're deceiving yourself. That's not the tree of life you came to. You came to an emotional experience. The tree of life you can come to only if the sword has fallen on your self-life. In other words, if I'm still disturbed and upset when somebody provokes me, and I've not put myself to death there, I'm not really devoted to Christ. I can feel very emotional in a meeting when I'm singing His praise, but I'm not really devoted to Christ. So there's a close connection between taking up the cross and devotion to Christ. You know, when Jesus went to the cross, He said, I'm going to the cross to prove my love for my Father. That's what He said in the Gospel. That the world may know that I love the Father. I'm going to the cross. So it was his devotion to his Father was proved by his going to the death on the cross. And it's exactly the same for you and me. I cannot come to the tree of life without that sword falling on me. And if I think I have come to the tree of life without that sword falling on my self-life, that is not the tree of life. I say that because I find a lot of people deceive themselves that they love Jesus when they don't. Ask yourself, my dear friends, whether you have really allowed the sword to fall on your self-life, and whether in the daily temptations and provocations of life, that sword has fallen on you, and you die in every temptation as you face it. You say, I've got to die here. That's how you prove your love for Jesus. As you die, you reach the tree of life. Any tree that you access without dying is not the tree of life. So I hope you got that clear, because there's so many people I feel today are deceiving themselves about devotion to Christ. We can say the serpent has deceived them. How does the serpent deceive them? 2 Corinthians 11:3, I fear that the serpent will, by his craftiness, will lead you astray to some other tree and make you think that is the tree of life, make you think that is devotion to Christ. And you're emotional and you're excited and you love Jesus and you sing some wonderful songs, and the devil's led you astray because there was no sword that fell on your self-life in that process. So for myself, it has become very clear that I cannot say that I have a fervent devotion to Jesus Christ if I'm not daily taking up the cross. That is why you've often heard me say that God listens to our praises on Sunday morning if He saw us taking up the cross right through from Monday to Saturday. He's not listening how good our music is and how well we sing. No. Those are all for worldly choirs. And it's possible that some people here in CFC also think that the Lord appreciates them because they play music well or sing well. I want to tell you, you're deceiving yourself. You're deceiving yourself. It's very clear to me that some folks who sing are conscious that they're singing well. And imagine that the Lord accepts their singing just because they sing well. I'm not saying we shouldn't sing well. But I want to say the Lord accepts your singing. Praise to Him if He's seen you take up the cross Monday to Saturday before you come on Sunday and sing to the Lord. Then it has come out of devotion to Christ. So I want you to be gripped by one thing, and that's the main thing I'm trying to emphasize here. Devotion to Christ comes out of taking up the cross every day. And that is proved by the fact that there's a sword in front of the genuine tree of life. And any way in which Satan can lead us astray from that death of the cross, from the slaying of the cross, he will seek to do. This is why you read in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 16, the strong rebuke that Jesus gave to Peter when Jesus, for the first time, Matthew 16:21, for the first time He told His disciples that He would have to suffer and go to the cross and die. And Peter said, "No, Lord, that will never happen to you." Immediately, Jesus turned around and said, "Get behind me, Satan." There are only two occasions where Jesus said that. Once was directly to the devil, when the devil told him to fall down and worship him. He said, "Get behind me, Satan." And the other is here to the Peter, when Peter told him not to go the way of the cross. Do you see the connection there? The way the devil was coming through Peter to lead Jesus away from the way of the cross. It was the voice of the devil. And Jesus recognized it. He was not going to be deceived by the schemes of Satan. But very often we are. Think back over your life in the past 2-3 months. And ask yourself, as far back as you can remember, the occasions where you had the opportunity to die to yourself and please the Lord, and you didn't take it. You spoke back in anger when somebody spoke to you in anger. You reacted without dying. There are many situations like that. In situations where you were seeking God's will, you didn't die to the pull of self, which usually comes through money and honor and position. You didn't say, Lord, what is your will for me? What will glorify you most? Instead, you sought the things that the world seeks after. Money, honor, position, and took your decision. Did a sword fall on your self-life there? No. But you imagine that you love Jesus. This is the deception of Satan. So it's my duty to warn you, and I believe that many people sitting in our CFC churches have lost their devotion to Jesus Christ. I don't say that to scold anyone. I don't say that to rebuke anyone. But I do say, dear brothers, that I feel that we have missed out on something if we have not been gripped by the way of the cross. How much do you hear the word of the cross being preached in CFC churches today like it was in the early days? Have we missed out on something there? There's only one thing that Jesus said I have to do every day of my life, and that's to take up the cross. Because that's the only way to the tree of life. That's the only way I prove my devotion to Jesus Christ. So as we look into the future, and as we seek to share God's truth with other people, I need to ask myself, am I going to be gripped by this? Have I been trying to get to some tree which I think is a tree of life, devotion to Jesus, but I've missed out on the cross? Then that's not the tree of life. That's not real devotion to Christ. Satan has led me astray. Not into gross sin. I may be much better than most believers around me, but I missed out on God's will. So may God help us to take this one matter seriously. I don't want to talk about anything else. One single thing is enough. Fervent devotion to Christ is the tree of life, and the only way to get there is through allowing the sword to fall on my self-life. Anything other than that, any other tree which I think is the tree of life is not the tree of life. There is no devotion to Christ except through daily dying to myself. May God help us. God bless you all.